miracle he survived. What about the other miracle from other brother? Just hearing about this crash. Like, I'm scared to fly now, just to even sit on a plane now.
That will be with me. That's with me for life. That till the day I die, I will think what were our last moments.
After many weeks of intense emergency review, the preliminary conclusion on the shocking plane crash in India was finally made public. However, the content of the report immediately triggered a wave of outrage, as all responsibility was placed on the two deceased pilots, while the name Boeing, the manufacturer of the aircraft, was almost completely absent. The families of the victims could not accept this conclusion. They strongly opposed it, calling it a case of deliberate blame shifting designed to protect one of the most powerful corporations in the global aviation industry. So is that 15-page report truly transparent, or just another familiar script written to help Boeing escape accountability once again? To understand why this conclusion triggered such a wave of public outrage, we must begin with what it actually revealed. The 15-page report that sparked fury. The document did not directly name who was responsible for the tragedy, but the way each section was written led most readers to implicitly believe that the cockpit was fully at fault. According to the report, just seconds after takeoff, two fuel switches were moved from the run mode to cut off, causing both engines to shut down simultaneously. This was considered the primary cause of the crash. In the cockpit voice recording, only a short exchange was released. "Why did you cut off?" "I did not." There was no confirmation of who said which line. However, aside from this detail, the report did not mention any other possible scenarios. There was no analysis related to potential faults in the control system. Possibilities like software failure, faulty components, or system malfunction were completely absent. In addition, there was no mention of any emergency situation that would require the pilots to cut off the fuel supply. All the arguments in the report led readers in a single direction: that the pilots performed the wrong procedure. The problem is shutting off the fuel switches is not something that can happen by accident. It requires multiple confirmation steps, removing the safety lock, getting agreement from the co-pilot, and only then switching to cutoff mode. This procedure is only executed if the engine is on fire or experiencing a serious failure. But throughout the report, there was no record of any such situation occurring during the flight. Although the report did not accuse directly, it silently placed the blame on the two pilots, who are no longer alive to defend themselves. Meanwhile, all factors possibly related to hardware errors, programming faults, or fuel system design flaws were inexplicably excluded. This is exactly why the victims' families believe that Boeing, the manufacturer of the crashed aircraft, had interfered. They believe the entire report was steered aimed at protecting the image and interests of this powerful corporation by placing the entire blame on the flight crew. To them, this conclusion is no longer a neutral technical document, but a staged production. Previously, Boeing had spent over $1.1 billion to avoid criminal prosecution after two fatal crashes involving the 737 MAX line. To the families of the victims, this shows Boeing has become too accustomed to using money to escape consequences. And this time, they believe the story is no different. Boeing escapes blame. Who is truly at fault? To answer that question, we must return to the technical details that were inexplicably omitted from the official report. The first and most critical issue: what caused the engines to stop producing thrust. In aviation, cutting off fuel during takeoff is an extremely dangerous action. This is the moment when the aircraft needs maximum power to leave the runway, and any interruption can lead to disaster. This action is only performed in two cases: either when the aircraft has landed and is parked at the gate, or when there is a serious engine issue such as a fire, and even then, it requires dual confirmation from both pilots. But according to the report, there were no signs of fire, no technical warnings, and no recorded emergency situations. The aircraft lifted off normally, then suddenly lost all thrust just seconds later. When the pilots gave no command and the system issued no warning, what caused the switch to move to cutoff? The focus of suspicion immediately shifted to the electronic control system, designed and operated entirely by Boeing. One crucial hypothesis that had been mentioned, but completely excluded from the report, was a failure in the fuel control chip. This component is responsible for transmitting fuel delivery signals to the engines. If the chip stops sending signals for just a few seconds, fuel flow halts, thrust disappears, and the aircraft crashes. Such malfunctions can stem from sudden temperature shifts, overheating after multiple flight cycles, or simple microchip degradation, all of which are technical risks within the manufacturer's control. An industry engineer once described it bluntly: it's like a frozen computer. The chip stops responding, fuel is cut off. But there's no reset button in the cockpit, and a few seconds of delay is enough to crash the plane. Worse still, the system gives no warning when the chip fails. No alarms, no signals, no feedback. The crew might only notice the loss of thrust in a brief moment, too late to react. The line, "Why did you cut off?" is the only thing that remained, and both the one who asked and the one who responded are no longer alive to explain. If that chip is so fragile, why wasn't it replaced with a more advanced version? If the error can occur under normal flying conditions, why wasn't the system redesigned? And if the risk was previously identified, why was no mandatory measure enforced? Ironically, these questions are not new. As early as 2018, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, and General Electric released a special technical bulletin titled Special Airworthiness Information Bulletin, SAIB, recommending that the chip be replaced after 11,000 flight cycles to prevent signal loss. But instead of issuing a mandatory directive, Airworthiness Directive, the FAA only gave a recommendation, meaning airlines could simply choose not to act. For a technical flaw capable of killing hundreds in seconds, such a response is baffling. Experts believe the root cause does not lie in engineering assessments, but in pressures from Boeing and GE, aimed at avoiding accountability and minimizing financial damage. One detail makes the entire investigation report deeply suspicious. The name Boeing is almost entirely absent from the document, not questioned, not analyzed, not held accountable for any technical responsibility. And that's no coincidence. If an aviation investigation system truly existed to protect human lives, the very first question should be, where is the manufacturer's role in the entire chain of design, oversight, inspection, assembly, certification? But here the name Boeing appears only once briefly, tucked away in a technical footnote as if intentionally hidden. No one asked why the fuel system could shut off automatically without warning. No one analyzed the connection between Boeing's control software and the chip manufactured by GE. Not a single question about why there was no alert mechanism before total thrust was lost. And no one challenged why, despite years of FAA warnings, the system still hadn't been modified. Silence. From everyone. From the manufacturer, from the investigators, from the airline, from the regulators. And that collective silence is the clearest sign this is not a normal investigation. This is a staged performance. In past crashes, at the very least, Boeing was named, even if only to be defended. But this time, even their presence was erased. Their role was reduced to providing technical data upon request, like a remote consultant supposedly uninvolved with the plane that went down. That is the pinnacle of corporate exoneration in aviation. When you have the power to design the system, certify your own product, then sit on the advisory panel, investigating it, you hold both the blade and the shield. No independent oversight, no neutral investigative body, no one standing outside the circle to ask, how can a corporation already tied to 2 catastrophic crashes, accused of concealing the MCAS software and having spent billions to avoid criminal charges, once again walk away from an investigation without a trace. This absence is not a flaw, it is a strategy. And if Boeing can disappear from this investigation, what's to stop them from doing it again? Amid the growing suspicion surrounding Boeing, attention has begun to shift toward Air India. As the operator of the 787 involved in the crash, Air India is obligated to follow technical recommendations from the manufacturer and regulatory agencies, including the 2018 advisory about replacing the fuel control chip after 11,000 flight cycles. But the question is, how many cycles had that aircraft flown? Was the chip replaced on schedule? The document does not mention it. There are no specific figures, no maintenance records attached, even though this is basic information in any aviation investigation. That absence leads many to believe this is not a coincidental omission, but a deliberate blank space. If the chip had exceeded its usage threshold without being replaced, the responsibility clearly falls on Air India. But if the airline had fully complied with the technical guidance, then once again responsibility circles back to Boeing for a system design that was not safe enough even after proper maintenance. Whichever scenario, this is a detail that cannot be ignored, and yet it is completely blurred out. Throughout the entire case, Air India appears like a character in the middle, visible enough not to be forgotten, yet lacking all the necessary data to determine whether its role was right or wrong. However, what angers people the most is not just the technical gaps in the report, but the profound feeling of being insulted. For the families who lost loved ones in the tragedy, this is no longer a simple investigation, but an outright cover-up, where the truth is distorted to protect the powers behind it all. The outrage of the victims' families. Many have accused the report of being biased, misleading, and deliberately avoiding key questions about technical design system faults and manufacturer responsibility. Some family members called it an organized cover-up, while others described the document as a tool crafted to divert public attention, blame the dead, and protect corporations that remain untouched. At a closed-door meeting with investigators, a mother who lost her child in the crash stated bluntly, "We don't see any investigation in that report. All we see is a campaign to wipe responsibility clean for Boeing and the entire system behind it." Another relative said, "We lost someone we love, but we don't want others to die because of this same negligence." The response did not stop at words. A group of victims' families has begun hiring international legal counsel to explore the possibility of suing Boeing in the United States, accusing the manufacturer of ignoring technical advisories and failing to implement mandatory preventive measures, even though the risks had been known for years. They are demanding access to the full maintenance records of the 787 aircraft, the software data related to the fuel control system, and all internal documents connected to the 2018 chip replacement bulletin. But every request has been blocked, either citing confidential internal information or saying it is outside the current scope of investigation. Some relatives have also declared they will submit petitions to ICAO and the U.S. Transportation Committee, calling for the investigation to be reopened with oversight from independent international experts. They believe only when the investigation is taken beyond national borders will the buried truth stand a chance of being revealed. Losing a loved one in an aviation accident is a shock that nothing can compensate, but for many, that pain was not the end. To see the deceased turned into official culprits in the final report was an insult they could not accept. Cold, unjust, and cruel. Those who can no longer defend themselves were chosen as the easiest place to assign blame. A mother who lost her child burst into tears in choking anguish, but her voice still carried the weight of anger. He's dead and still being blamed, while Boeing remains unharmed, just like every other time. The outrage does not stop at the cold lines in the report. It spreads from quiet meetings, erupts on social media, and sinks deep into legal teams silently gathering documents. For the victims' families, the issue is not only that the truth is being hidden, but that the truth has been distorted. They do not believe in the independence of the investigation. They see clearly the entire process is being controlled by people who have something to hide, and the biggest name among them is none other than Boeing. There are questions that repeat throughout the meetings but have never once been answered. Who is in control of the investigation? Who directed the removal of the possibility of a system error from the official report? And the biggest question, who is behind that calculated silence? Trust in the aviation investigation system, once considered a standard of transparency and rigor, has now been shaken to its core. A plane crashes, a report conclusion that nearly clears the manufacturer of responsibility. A series of real technical failures, yet no one is held accountable. These things cannot be a coincidence. The victims' families are determined to pursue Boeing's responsibility to the end, a corporation that has escaped consequences many times through billion-dollar settlements and now once again stands outside the investigation as if unrelated to the crashed aircraft. The Indian Pilots Association has also officially spoken out. In a statement sent to the media, the organization strongly rejected the conclusions of the report, stating that the document lacks foundation, lacks specific data, and is entirely speculative. The association emphasized switching the fuel lever to cutoff is an extremely strict procedure, only permitted in the case of an engine fire, and must be confirmed verbally by both pilots. The report's implication that both pilots made a serious mistake without any emergency situation occurring is an illogical assumption. Not only standing up for the pilots who perished, the association also warned if human error continues to be too easily blamed while overlooking the review of technical systems, it will set an extremely dangerous precedent for global aviation. And the voices do not stop in India. Immediately after the official report was published, many international aviation organizations and experts expressed deep concern about the way the investigation was conducted, especially the incredibly vague role of Boeing throughout the entire document. The crash involving the Boeing 787 in India is not merely an aviation incident. It is a chilling alarm about how major corporations can influence the entire investigative process, even when hundreds of lives have already been lost. The 15-page report barely mentions Boeing as a technically accountable party. Key details related to the control system were blurred. Potential technical scenarios, from software failures, integration flaws, to fuel control issues, were all dismissed without clear justification. Meanwhile, the blame was placed on the deceased pilots, and the airline was mentioned just enough to fill a gap. The intense reaction from the victims' families, professional associations, and international observers shows that this is no longer a domestic matter of one nation or airline. It touches on a fundamental question for modern aviation: who oversees the corporations holding the greatest technical power? And when disaster strikes, who can hold them accountable? If a manufacturer can completely vanish from an accident investigation, what prevents them from doing it again? And if the truth is adjusted to protect a brand instead of human lives, where is the actual value of what we call a technical report? The aircraft went down, people died, but this story is far from over, because the most critical question, who is truly at fault, remains unanswered. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content ahead. Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to know what you think about this case. Thank you for staying with us until the end. And as always, what we've shared comes from multi-angle analysis, not official investigation conclusions. Please consult additional sources for a fuller, more objective understanding.